On the clock now, the Los Angeles Rams. Next up, it's the Broncos on the clock. It's the Cleveland Browns now on the clock. It's now the Vikings' turn on the clock. The Buffalo Bills are now on the clock. The Black Knights are now on the clock. On the clock now, the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Houston Texans are now on the clock. With the next selection, the Carolina Panthers on the clock. It's the Philadelphia Eagles now on the clock. The Miami Dolphins now on the clock. The Tennessee Titans are now on the clock. Next selection, the Lions are on the clock. The Cardinals on the clock now. On the clock now, it's the Los Angeles Chargers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock. The New Orleans Saints are now on the clock. Now the Indianapolis Colts selection. On the clock now, the Dallas Cowboys. The Pittsburgh Steelers on the clock now. The Los Angeles Rams now on the clock. The Cleveland Browns are now on the clock. The Minnesota Vikings are now on the clock. The Green Bay Packers are now on the clock. The Black Knights are now on the clock. Next up, the Titans are on the clock. On the clock now, the Houston Texans. The Carolina Panthers now on the clock. Up next, the Philadelphia Eagles are on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Miami Dolphins. On the clock now, it's the Tennessee Titans. The Detroit Lions now on the clock. The Arizona Cardinals are now on the clock. With the next pick, the Kansas City Chiefs are now on the clock. Next up, the Jets are on the clock. The Bengals now on the clock. The Colts now on the clock. The Chicago Bears are now on the clock. The Las Vegas Raiders now on the clock. The San Francisco 49ers are now on the clock. The Denver Broncos are on the clock. The Atlanta Falcons are now on the clock. On the clock now, the Buffalo Bills. The Black Knights are now on the clock. Next up, it's the Seahawks on the clock. The Panthers are on the clock. Now we turn to the Eagles. They're on the clock. Next up, it's the Dolphins on the clock. It's the Tennessee Titans now on the clock. On the clock now, the Detroit Lions. It's now the Arizona Cardinals selection. They're on the clock. Now on the clock, the Los Angeles Chargers. It's the Bucks, now on the clock. It's the New Orleans Saints, now on the clock. The Indianapolis Colts are now on the clock. The Dallas Cowboys are now on the clock. It's the Steelers now on the clock. Now on the clock, the Rams. Next up, the Cleveland Browns are on the clock. And now on the clock, the Minnesota Vikings. Next up, it's the Packers on the clock. With the next pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars are on the clock. On the clock now, the Houston Texans. Now on the clock, the Giants. The Tennessee Titans are now on the clock. It's the Detroit Lions now on the clock. And now on the clock, it's the Arizona Cardinals. Next up, the Titans are on the clock. With the next selection, the Lions are on the clock. The Cardinals on the clock now. Titans. The Detroit Lions now on the clock. The Arizona Cardinals are now on the clock. It's the Tennessee Titans now on the clock. On the clock now, the Detroit Lions. It's now the Arizona Cardinals selection. They're on the clock.